Welcome back to the Guile treatment. Doing episode 6 today. We have a guest, Barrett from Omaha, the man who most recently beat Kevin Broberg with his Kryptonite Mega Man 2 death.
This is 2 weeks in a row from Omaha. 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, you always got to just prop them up,
Yeah.
Give the people what they want. So I think we were talking about sideboarding today, yes?
Yeah. First, let's get why don't you introduce yourself, Barrett, and give us a little background on your game, on your UFS career a little bit, and just for people who don't know you.
Awesome. Okay. My name's Barrett. I'm from Omaha. I'm best known for as Mason Johnson's basically like understudy. He plays Weisschwartz with me, which is my main card game. And about 5 months ago, I'm just like, hey man, I hear the prize support's pretty good for UFS. I'm talking about PTCs because I want plane tickets. I don't want cardboard. And I'm like, hey, I've played it before because Miles taught me. Why don't you help? I want to get competitive really fast. And he's like, all right, sure, let's build you a deck. And so I played for 5 months. Hey, you should go to Nats. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go to Nats. It's in Atlanta. My grandparents live there. I'll visit my family. And then I showed up, and I did way better than I should have for someone who's only been playing for 5 months. And I got 4th place. To get there, I had to beat Kevin Broberg's Psyche deck. By the way, I had no idea what she did when I sat down across the table.
It's he.
It's he.
Or he, whatever. See, I don't even know. But I had a really good weekend, and I was playing a deck that I now, trying to get even better at this game, have learned is a very poorly designed deck. But I made it work, and
yeah.
I'm kind of the iconic. I'm going to make Mega Man 2, I guess, my character until he rotates. So that's pretty much who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm new to the game. I've been on UFS University a few times now. They're giving me my own hosting segments, so I'm kind of helping them out as well.
Oh, cool.
So I'm just kind of new, and I'm known as I'm the second lamest player next to James, because I play defensive reversal-y decks, and people hate it.
But at least you don't
I'm pretty sure
sit
James
there,
just plays decks that don't actually have attacks. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then when he finally gives up, he's like, "Oh, I guess I'll play the Infinite." And then wins the Prepare to Fight tournament with it. Oh, I'm done with the Infinite. And then they fix it.
Yeah. What a lame guy. Lame player.
I know.
So, kind of like this was brought up to me by a couple people online. I don't remember names. Sorry for that. I don't usually pay attention to that stuff.
Shout outs
to those guys.
Shout outs to nobody.
Really, when you break it, like sideboarding, people want to hear about it, but no one really wants to talk about it because it's kind of tough to talk about it. Go ahead.
It's the science that nobody knows, right? Because it's very like match to match, and like how do you describe match to match? Sideboarding. So like it's very hard to describe.
Yeah, it's like that meme guy, the science, or like the aliens guy.
Yeah, I guess right. As soon as you start talking about sideboarding, everyone just realizes this guy doesn't know anything about sideboarding.
Yeah, exactly. I know me personally, going into I build sideboards for locals just for practicing sideboarding because it's nothing like going to a major and like, oh, I've never sideboarded before. I think in my entire UFS career at majors, I maybe sided like 4 times. Could be why I've never topped. So, but normally it's just like the decks I face. I'm just like, well, it's like adding an extra copy of an attack in or extra defensive piece. So it's really, do I really need it? Do I not? Normally it's, when you sideboard, you try to shore up your weaknesses in your deck, technically, I believe. Or try to tip the scale in your favor in certain matchups, I believe. That's how I take sideboarding.
I mean, I guess the thing for me is, Chris, you'll relate to this. Coming from like a background playing versus, there was a game like they didn't have any sideboards. Yeah. In part just because it was best of 1 matches. So when are you going to side? Even I guess in tops it might have been best out of 3, but it just
there was
it was
no
basically like if you wanted to play tech, it was main board, and there were ways to find it. So coming to the UFS, and it's just like now all of a sudden I have this sideboard, but I don't really know what to do with it, if you will, just because like I'm not familiar with the concept. But then at the same time, some of the other games, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in Magic, your sideboard is 15 cards?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
I believe 15. It's 15 as well for Yu-Gi-Oh! Another comparative game. Yeah.
Well, so the thing is, and so what? Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are like 40 cards, right?
Yeah,
like
40 to 60. You keep it as close to 40 for consistency.
Right. So, I mean, you're talking over 30% or over a third of your deck is sideboard. And Magic is similar because it's 60, but I think you're typically running 15, 18 lands. There won't be like dual lands or stuff, but that's a good fifth or whatever of your deck that doesn't really matter. It's not like you're like, oh man, like should I change these lands? Like you're changing the guts of your deck. Mm-hmm. And so again, if you have 15 cards, you can basically end up just playing a completely different deck.
Yeah.
Whereas like UFS, you're talking only 8 cards out of 60, or if you're running like a bigger deck, if you start hitting like 70, 75, it's such a small percentage of change, and just because of the inherent how many cards you draw and check, you already don't see cards that you have in your main board.
Yeah.
Yep. So I feel like it's sort of one of those things where I feel like the difference between someone who's like really good at siding and one who's not so good, it's noticeable, but it's also like sort of minimized just by the randomness of the game. I think you're going to be much more impacted by like deck building in general, where you're like, well, my main board's good, the side doesn't really matter. I treat it sort of like Chris said, where I might have something where I go, I have some speed hate in this, but if I go against something that's like a dedicated like speed pump, if I see like a Lilith or a Felicia or something, then maybe I want some more like speed hate. Or if I'm playing, I get that thing is it's like a meta call. Yeah, so exactly. If you expect to see like a Wily, or you expect to see something running like pulled my trigger or something assets. And there you go. Base is a great one where it's like if you can get rid of treble, like that's great. So maybe it's almost always good to have like 1 or 2 slots maybe for asset hate. And if you couldn't find a spot for it like in your main board, I know I often would find a spot for at least 1 or 2 copies of like Herald of Germania, or what's the Jetta one?
Pity for a Traitor.
Yeah. Just stuff like that where, it's like just throw one in there, and then that way like you at least can sort of have an out where you're like, well, I hope I see this, and if I do, great, and if I don't, well, at least I have a chance.
Right. Sometimes I'll go ahead and if I say I'll play 1 copy of Pity for a Traitor main board, take my Nats deck. I believe I had 1 main, 1 sided because I was playing Grant off of Death. So, and I knew Pull My Trigger was huge. I didn't really have any other type of asset hate other than I didn't play assets personally, so I couldn't Cowboy Battery them, which is a great asset hate in its own right. But so normally like what Rob said, I will add in extra pieces. I won't have like what do they call it, like a transformative sideboard where I change a lot of things. It's just an additive sideboard where I'll take out pieces that aren't needed and add in pieces that I have already in there.
Yeah, I'll often do that where I'll maybe mainboard I'll have like 2 or 3 copies of a card, and then I'll have 1 more in the side. Mm-hmm. And so there'll be things where it's like I have some answers, but then if I go against a certain deck, I'm like, oh, like I want more copies of this. Yep. So like, yeah, I don't.
Go ahead. That's interesting because when I build all my sideboards, I never put a copy of a card that's in my main board into my sideboard for this game, because of exactly what you were talking about with the you're checking so many cards, you're drawing so many cards that you're not going to see half the cards in your main board every game. I don't want to have to side into a card that makes me feel like if I don't see this card, this matchup's going to be terrible. So instead, it's all what you were kind of relating on earlier, Chris, which was I really only sideboard cards that I think are in specific matchups. This gives me an edge, but my main deck should still be able to win the game without it. And I'm also not a big fan of the one-ofs that you guys are talking about, because I think, again, with the randomness checking, you're never going to see that one extra copy, so why bother? So for me, my rule of thumb for sideboards is more transformative, like you said, Rob, which is either I'm going to play a full attack in my, like 4 copies of an attack in my sideboard that I just couldn't put in my main board. For me, that's a Leaf Shield in a lot of my decks. Like, I'm already playing a lot of defensive cards for the decks that I build, like Prepare to Fight and things like that. I'm like, I don't need the 8 Omni blocks. So I'll put 4 away. And at least for my Nationals deck, because that's how I do a lot of, I'm basing a lot of my discussion off of my Nats experience, which is like Hyperbomb doesn't work against every matchup because I'm a 6-hander. So, and I'm a 6-hander with 28 life. So I side out my Hyper Bombs a lot for the Leaf Shields because I just then don't play a 5-diff attack in my deck and it's super smooth. So, like, that's just one way. Or, like, at Nationals, it was different. I was playing 1 stop and 1 showdown in the sideboard. I've since changed the deck to where I just mainboarded showdown and I sided out. And I only had the 2 stop sideboard, so it was 2 and 2. But like I wanted those answers, and so like although I'm being a hypocrite because at Nationals I did mainboard 2 stop and 2 showdowns, and I sided 1 more of each. But that was more so because I would always side out if one action didn't do well in a match. Like stop, okay, I don't need to stop this character, and the 3 mid block is very hard to use sometimes.
Right.
So I would just like stop is out completely, and showdown is way more important. So we put in the 1 showdown and 1 homemade explosives. So the only 1 extras was more so because I had to I had to figure out what I was putting in place of that other one that was in there.
Yeah,
right.
I in my Woodman deck, I run 3 White House mainboard, and then I swap out for stops, which will probably change to something else now. That probably gateway shuffles, but I'll probably do something in the I'll flip flop the 2 depending on the matchup. But go ahead, Rob. You had something to say.
I know. I think Scott was doing that for Rockford. I think he had mainboard apples, and he had White Houses in the side.
Sure.
And so, in certain matchups, he'd be like, "Well, if I'm bringing in White House, I really shouldn't be playing apples." So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think one thing too, and I mean, I certainly don't do this, but I know, someone like Phil Birch. Like, he sort of has, like, his sideboard, and his sideboard is sort of designed where his deck he has sort of, like, his main board, and then his sideboard is sort of, like, designed for if he's going first. So, basically, if he, loses, like, game 1 or game 2, and so he's going first, he'll, like, he has sort of, like, a pre-scripted, like, 8 cards or whatever that just come out of his deck, and he replaces them with, like, the 8 cards in his sideboard.
Yeah.
And, I know I believe tries to kind of line up checks too. So if he's putting in a 4 check, he's taking out a 4 check. If he's putting in a 5, he's taking out a 5. Like all that stuff, so that the numbers sort of stay the same. I definitely don't. I definitely
try and do that when doing foundations, but like attacks, I obviously I don't. I'm going to take out the 5 diff for this 3 diff because it's way easier to play. So
right.
Yeah,
but
I know that.
Like, I mean, that's something for sure too. Like but I think that's probably more of almost like an aggro game plan. If like, oh, well, I'm going first, so I'm going to, I'll have that extra turn of build potentially. So, maybe there's certain things that you feel like more comfortable doing, or there's cards in your deck that you're like, well, if I'm going first, like this isn't as important because I shouldn't need as much help passing checks or doing whatever. And then you have somebody like Garrett, who I think almost always has like 1 or 2 characters in his sideboard. Because he'll sort of design decks that like sort of function on various characters, and like I know a lot of times he'll sort of have like those extra attacks in the sideboard as well to really, if he decides that he has, because he plays sort of a slower, more controlling game plan, and I think sometimes he finds, well, like I need a little bit more offense, a little bit more reach. Like early. And so, for instance, in the UK, when he was playing Vincent, and that was like 84 cards, in a 5-hander, and I think it was only like 16 or 17 attacks. And his sideboard was a couple like tech answers, and then an Athena and like 4 Rain Flush. And that was just kind of like the gear change where if he's playing against somebody where he just goes, I don't think I want to like try to grind this person out. Well, I'll just play like a really, really, really good character that can like build a ton, and all the defense I'm playing anyway should keep me alive. And I'm like siding in, like, he was already running like a bunch of big attacks, and then you just bring in the Rain Flush as well. So it was a lot of expensive stuff, but it was like, but that's sort of really some almost high level stuff of what you can do with your sideboard. And I mean, I know for me, it's definitely not stuff that I typically attempt. But
I was going to say one of the things, my biggest weakness, I would say, in sideboarding, because I'm too afraid to try it out even, is sideboarding characters, actually, is exactly that. I don't think I've ever built a sideboard with characters in it, just because I'm so afraid that, like, you built this main board to optimize this character, and then, like, what you throw in the sideboard character, because it has to offer enough or completely change your game plan, like with the Vincent Gray and the Athena. Like, you go from a 5-hander to a 7-hander, and it's just completely different.
I know...
or, it's one of those things, like... Or, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to go back on the Garrett story. He did the same thing against Corey in finals at Worlds when he won. He went from Jiffany to Felicia because Jiffany wasn't able to keep up with Dimitri. He wasn't able to push the damage through and make it fast enough.
Well, I think it was mostly that he wanted the Ever Hopeful.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, the other thing too is, like, I'm almost positive that sideboard was Felicia and like 6 or 7 attacks.
Yeah, I think it was,
because that was another one where it's like 80 cards.
Yeah,
and he he was sort of relying on that 8 hand size to just sculpt a kill turn. And then when he went to somebody that wanted to be like Felicia, who wants to attack almost every turn because she needs to attack to get that momentum online, and so he was just like, well, my 80 card deck or whatever with like 17 or 18 attacks like isn't going to cut it. So I'll just basically I can't change the number of cards in my deck, so I'll just change the composition of it so it'll be more in line with the percentage of attacks that you would run in like a 65-70 card deck. I mean, I guess that kind of boils down to like numbers a bit, but right, those are really sort of the dramatic like sideboards.
Yeah, I know. I played after Phil won Nats with Jiffany, I played that deck in Omaha the following like couple weeks. It was that shotgun PTC that happened that never really happened before Rockford, and he told me that what he would do is, if he won the die roll going first and he won, he would swap out 8 offensive cards for 8 defensive cards. Like, he never started with Templar main boarded. He would side them in defensively.
That's a JJ thing right there. That was him at Nationals.
Okay.
He was playing.
And then
I think that's something that Shoemaker did as well with Yamato Man.
I think he does. I think a lot of the aggro players will do that, because if they can win the game 1 and then grind it out game 2 and possibly win game 2, or if they lose, they can just, whatever, just reside my offense in and just go to town.
Well, I think that kind of mentality, I'm obviously not an aggressive player, but I see it every time when I play against JJ or Jacob Johnson. Obviously, if you can win game 1 as the aggressive deck, the reason why I could kind of see why someone would side in those Templars or the more defensive play is because if you're able to play defensively and you kind of know that your opponent is probably going to try and be more aggressive, because if they lose this game, they lose the match, right? So they're going to have to do more. And if you can just survive a little bit of their commitment, when they overcommit a little bit with like a Templar, drawing 2 more blocks, stuff like that, I think that's enough. And then you're like, all right, cool, I'm going to pound you.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's one of those really big reasons on why, like, that kind of mentality exists with people with aggressive decks. But, I mean, like, I definitely don't side into... I don't know. I can't say that, because Leaf Shield is totally a defensive card.
Hey, you can kill people with Leaf Shield. I've done it.
They're too low for 9, so...
Yeah, they're pretty huge, man. They can get big. Especially with, like, the cards from Bebop now, that there's a lot of techie pieces that you could like a funky tomato, or what's the other one that reverses the
Curious Magnetism. I love that.
Yeah, I got that was done to me too this past week. I was going with a cannonade that was at least 12 damage, and they had reduced the speed and then flipped it and only took 2. I was like, this is great, man.
I think honestly, Curious Magnetism to me though, like because we're talking about sideboard, I'm mainboarding that card right now.
I would say you would definitely mainboard at least one copy of it. It's at least a one of for sure.
It's the new to me. It's another kind of like refusing to let go card to add to the deck. Like refusing to let go just says, okay, that multiple doesn't do anything. Or with Curious Magnetism, it says printed -2, swap it to its speed, I'm gonna block this attack.
Yeah.
So like they're really cool and cheeky.
Yeah, I like a lot of those. Like even like even with like Gateway Shuffle, like a card like that, I don't even know if I'd probably just main 3. Actually, I'd probably just main 4 all the time because that card's just too damn good. But
I made 4 and
yeah, I my current build has 3 main because I only own 3. And I have 1 in the side because I don't actually own.
I opened 16 boxes. So.
Yeah.
And how many did you open? 4?
9.
Oh,
really?
I'm so lucky.
I'm all out though. I sold them all. I sell UFS singles now, so I'm all out.
Yeah, I opened 2 boxes.
I pulled my 4 out.
Yeah, I opened 2 boxes today for singles for the store, and I pulled a Gateway, and I'm just like, do I keep it? Or do I sell it? And it's like, do I keep it? I gotta sell this, so I'm gonna try to sell it over the weekend for the reason.
I think we opened like 9 boxes or so, and I think we got like 7 or 8 copies of Feigned Interest. I was like,
oh yeah,
no.
My bane, the bane of my existence is Jupiter Jazz. I opened 4 I opened 4. It's a good card, but I don't want to see that when I want Gateway Shuffles. That's the thing.
For sure.
When I want shuffles.
I mean, I opened 2 pre-release kits.
Yeah.
And like from opening 16 boxes, we opened a playset of every ultra rare except M3C. We only opened 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So getting back on topic.
You're right.
Getting back on topic.
Kind of what you were talking about earlier, Chris. You brought up how you kind of wanted to bring up the idea of sideboarding to like newcomers.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But what I do tell people, because I'm an expert at this game now, but I tell them when they're getting into it.
Yeah.
I always tell them to build a sideboard like on UFS Ultra or whatever, and then what I tell them is okay. Obviously, like when we're playing for fun, obviously we let our friends play with proxies because they're brand new to the game. Like it's not a big deal. But I'm like, feel free to put your proxies for like the Templars and the Throw It Downs that you don't own yet because you're still looking for them. But like, maybe if you want to come play at a locals, your sideboard cards are usually cheaper than your main board cards. Just put them in your main board for now until you get them. So like that's why I always tell people to build a sideboard, and then while you're trying to get to your completed deck, those cards become what those are supposed to be. Because obviously you've already considered putting them into your deck in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like that's kind of my biggest thing. It's not really anything with specific cards, but it's...
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I would say like, especially for like locals or something like that. I mean, it's sort of maybe like 50-50 on whether I like build a sideboard, and most of the time, like, we don't bother doing it because, I mean, first off, we don't have that much of a locals, and also because, generally, like, at least one of us doesn't have a sideboard, and so we're not going to be like, well, let me just switch my deck up to, match up against yours.
These 4 prepare to fights.
But, those are main board.
So, always. I look at every deck I've built.
I think it's good, even just playing without it, because you can sort of see like what your deck has problems with, and then I guess that's almost like sideboard, like 101 is, man, I've been playing this deck a lot, and when my opponent gets like assets out there, I can't do it. Like I have no way to interact with them. Okay, well. If I can't find space or don't want to find space main board, to put in asset hate, maybe I should put like 2 or 3 copies in my sideboard if I go to an event, or for anything. It could be. I guess it's typically stuff where it might be an action or just something that isn't necessarily super important, but it just has like 1 or 2 particular matchups that it makes better. And that way I feel like you can end up with cards that you never actually side in, because you might say like, oh, well, this card is for, for instance, when I went to Rochester with the Guile deck, I don't think I ever brought in Rescue Mission. And it was really, the idea was that it was in there if I played against any like sort of speed decks, and I didn't play against anything that like pumped speed with regularity. It's like I played base, I played Zangief, I played Disbro, Phil Birch, which I guess did pump speed, but that was a little bit more of like the damage, and I had some resets and stuff. So that was just something where I had these cards in my sideboard and never used them. I think that can be discouraging, I guess, because sometimes your sideboard probably isn't going to be the same for every single event. I guess it depends on your deck, I guess. I mean, we sort of talked about some of the more aggressive things where I guess the idea is if I'm going first, I want to do this. If I'm going second, I want to do this. I don't really care what your deck does. Yeah. But if your sideboard is more trying to answer decks that you expect to see, then it's kind of just predictive. You can say like, okay, what's this popular deck right now that I think I might run into? I need some hate for that. What is that popular deck? I might need some hate for that. And that's just meta dependent.
I think to sideboard appropriately, especially for like a nationals type event or like a worlds, you need to have a grasp of what the meta is. I know it's hard to shape the UFS meta because we technically don't. We have these events once a month, but that's basically all you can really do is let's look at the last 2 or 3 PTCs, see what topped, I guess, and that would be considered our meta. But you kind of have to have Go ahead.
That's kind of exactly what I'm scared about. I just bought my plane ticket for Vegas today, so I'll be for the Vegas PTC.
Oh yeah, you guys are gonna have fun because that's wide open now. You have no idea what you're gonna see.
Exactly. I have Guelph right beforehand, so I can see what people are gonna play in Guelph.
Are you going to Guelph, or are you just?
I'm not. It's too far for us. Yeah. So
I don't have a passport, so.
Yeah. So although I would love to. With Bebop now out, hell, this is even kind of the real biggest chance for people to try out the platinum cards, even in my opinion. There was the Rockford PTC, I get it, but more people just kind of took their chance to try those out, whether it was at the Robot Masters side event that you did, what I was doing, and they didn't really want to try it out for the last PTC of the year, right?
Reno was the last one. They had some
side effect.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, so and I didn't go to that one either. But Jury one and things like that. But this is kind of the first chance now with Platinum, now with Cowboy Bebop. We have no clue. How do I know it? So I've been mainboarding and sideboarding cards for Bebop cards because I'm expecting people to play Bebop cards. Yeah. Cards like Overly Dramatic that we were kind of talking about a little beforehand was it just shuts down some of the Bebop characters. Yep. So I just liked it. I was stop it. Bang, which came out, it's a really good card to stop every other card in Bebop, or characters. And to me, that's a really big deal right now. So I've been trying to side specifically for those stuff. But when it's coming to this event, I have no clue. I have no clue. I don't even feel confident with my main board because I'm so lost. I've been playing this new Mega Man 2 deck, and I'm like, dude, this is way better than my Nationals deck. It's amazing. And I'm getting my ass beat over and over again. And to go back on what you were talking about earlier, Rob, was for your locals, you don't even build sideboards because you don't really want to do that. And honestly, that's kind of how my sideboard was even created. For Nationals, I didn't have a sideboard until the week before because I was now that I've played just the main board, let me try things. So I tried out cards for Chivalry and Honor because everyone told me base was going to be everywhere. And so I tried out Stops because I didn't even know that was a card. I'm oh, that card's pretty cool. And cards like Leaf Shield because just for the more omniblock kind of stuff like that. And then I learned for Chivalry and Honor was working really well at my local scene, and I was told I was going to see a lot of bases and teams. So I main boarded this for Chivalry and Honors in teams for team day, and I learned this card's actually really good at main board. So that was a split decision for national singles that I kept at main board and not sideboarded. So like it's exactly what you're talking about. You try them in the main board for a long time, and then you kind of decide like maybe it's just supposed to stay there instead of be a sideboard card.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had that too. Where I had a card where I'm like, man, I like this, but I'm not 100% on it. Like, I'll just have it in the sideboard, and then literally every single game, you're just like, bringing this in. And you're just like, maybe these should just be mainboard cards.
Yeah.
Like,
Invincible Iron Body is one of those for me as well.
I know. For what was it in Rockford? I think almost every game too with Vega, I would bring in 2 copies, like the 2 copies of Demanding Sacrifice, the second copy of Reward, and like I think like another copy of whatever Vega's like Speed Hate is that gives it like -2.
Beauty of Power.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And like all those cards were just like,
Sacrifice.
oh,
What the fuck
does
is
this
that
help me be more annoying and live longer? Yeah. Okay, I'll bring it in.
Back talking Beauty of Power.
card? I gotta look up Demanding Sacrifice because I have no idea what that card does.
Or Demanding Submission. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know what that card does.
Oh,
Jeez,
yeah,
that
that's-
card's great.
Then that's burn you keyword card.
Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
A side note, that Twinkle deck I played, that won our locals this week, played 2 copies of that, main boarded, and I went to go powerful him. He's like, nah, you're burned for 4. I'm like, well, that's sad.
You still have to pay the cost though. It's like you still want to do it.
Yeah, I still want to do it, but I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to lose 4 life and then die on the backswing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
I was playing Scott, and he had 2 copies of Demanding Submission out, and I was playing that Iceman deck, and I had
get wrecked, son.
He was at Deadlock, and I played Hellgate and played the Enhance, where I was like, whenever you want to play an R, it costs you 4, and I was like, I'll stun 4. What are you gonna do about it? And he's like, I guess I'll cancel it. I'm like, I'm good with that trade. I was like, do you want to pop the other one too? We can both burn for 8. I don't care. It's like, I don't think I'm going to do that.
I know one
specifically, just real quick, with Demanding Submission, that is the reason why J-Ray beat me in game 3 of top 4 at Nationals, because he proceeded to build a Demanding Submission every time I was trying to trigger it. So it would be his turn, he'll play an attack or something, block, reversal, give it stun 2, and he's like, all right, I'll burn you for 2 instead. I'm like, all right, whatever, I got to eat it up now.
Mm-hmm.
And then after his attacks, he's like, I'll build another one. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it's my turn. I was like, I need to draw something to burn it out, right? So I'm like, okay, whatever. All right, I'll stun you again. All right, I'll burn you. Proceeded to build all 4 the entire game.
Wow.
And I lost because of that. I was just like, what nuts.
M Bison card. It actually gets play other than double knee press.
But that card's really good too.
I know it is. I know one example for me for another a sideboard was last year. What? Go ahead.
Did you say the only M Bison card that sees play?
Oh, there's a couple other.
Ruthless Dictator
I know.
is one of the most nice foundations
I know.
out there.
I beat Rodney in singles only because of that card. He couldn't go through Breaker 1. He just couldn't do it.
And Jet can't stop it, by the way. Jet's really good with it.
I played Robert off of air, and I could have sided into Felicia. I've actually built Robert multiple times because the deck is so similar to a Felicia deck that I could just swap her in. But I'm really bad at building a sideboard for one, because usually I just add in extra stuff that I have. But then I'm also notorious for not even siding the entire day. Like Rockford, I think I sided once, and that was against Corey in round 1 because I threw in my 4th Prepared to Fight and my extra copy of Homemade Explosives because I had to get rid of those Keogh's jackets because he was playing Keith. So that's the only way. I think I sided. That was the only time I sided the entire day because the other matchups really didn't call for it, I guess. I don't know. but
you're not mainboarding Prepared to Fight?
No, I mainboard 3 side 1 because I already
Why not 4?
because I already run
mainboarding 4.
Well, because maybe I need to now. So
how many cards are in this deck, Chris?
I think it was like close to like 70 something.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, it was Garrett. It was Garrett 4. So like I drew like 8 cards a turn.
Sounds like you need higher impact cards in your sideboard. Then
I took that deck apart, so whatever. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Continue.
There was no impact. I guess to kind of keep on with the sideboard trains, so that is a topic. I guess one opinion, I don't know if it's a popular one, but one that I kind of believe is, I actually think, speaking of like, the high impact cards, I think foundations are terrible sideboard cards. Just because, like, the idea of, like, I don't want to keep beating the dead horse, but, like, you draw so many cards, you check so many cards. Like, when you sideboard foundations, like, a lot of the time you're either, like, well, is this foundation, am I siding it because it's a block? Am I siding it because I'm going to actually try and build it? Like, so that's why, like, for Chivalry and Honor, like, it was a sideboard card in like, what I was trying to side against and what I didn't want to play against base really well. Because my reversal idea doesn't work against him. So I needed a new game plan, which is why cards like Homemade Explosives and for Chivalry were supposed to help me. But when I got to this point, like, foundations in the sideboard to me just are a waste of space because it's so unlikely you're even going to see those cards unless you put it as a 4 of. But in my opinion, like, I think attacks, actions, and assets should be really big in the sideboard because those are the ones that kind of have that bigger impact or can provide different answers that foundations don't supply in the game. And I think the same can be said about characters, but like I said, I'm no expert on character siding at all. So
yeah, I would agree. I would kind of agree with that. I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I would probably play 2 or 3 of foundations that I can't fit, maybe because they have like a non-block or it's a 4 check. More often than not, I'm siding more 4 checks than 5. So because it's usually like a 1-for-1 trade. Like take my Woodman stops a 4 check. So was White House. So the numbers really don't mess up that much because the block is +2 to +3. So it really doesn't hurt it all that much. But I think that's something
like to me. Like that mentality of like I'm siding this. Like, are you siding out the non-blocks or you're putting in non-blocks?
It would be probably putting in non-blocks because they're more techie cards, and a lot of the times the techie cards have more impact on that matchup, but usually they don't have a block.
The non-blocks that like I think of right away that I sideboard and I was never mainboard are like oh no. It's the 3/4 Endine's Foundation, respond, remove, give this attack flash.
High Seas Adventure.
High Seas Adventure, thank you. Like, to me, that's a really good foundation to sideboard. It's like, am I playing against, like, Tengu Dive? Or am I playing against a Cowboy Battery or a Flying Yamato Spear? Like, that, you don't get to multiple that card.
Yeah.
Or you don't get to use that combo on that card. You don't get to stun me here. Like, to me, a card like that, but at the same time, my mentality on wanting to sideboard that card is like, well, if I'm sideboarding into a non-block, so I'm decreasing the consistency off of taking out a block card or taking out a 5 check for that 4 check or that 3 diff foundation, so my foundation curve is a little off. Like that's the hardest part on why I just think foundations are just they just don't see a lot of room. There's no place for them in the sideboard really.
No, I understand that. Rob, you got anything else to add to that?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like various sideboards that I've run.
Yeah.
I think typically when I'm having like using like foundations in the sideboard, right? They're usually non-blocks and they're usually like some kind of effect that's like big. I mean, like Herald of Germania or something where like if I'm on life and I'm just like I really don't have anything that does anything to assets. So I'm gonna have like 2 Herald of Germania in here, and now I do. And it also has like a plus. Well, actually, I guess that has a +2 mid block.
Yeah.
So like there were times where I would bring that in just because like I feel like there have been more decks running around right now that have like a ton of like a very very heavy like mid lineups. I mean, especially when Ava was running around.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. Like that can be effective as well. Or even that, what was that? Was that like the Metal Man deck where it was like all mids? So like,
the slam.
I definitely have times too where I'll just bring in something in the sideboard just because it has like a good block.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even if like the effect is something that I can't use, and I'll just be like, well, like I've seen this guy's attack lineup now. Like he's running like a bunch of lows or like a bunch of mids, and I'm just like, well, I guess I'll take out some high blocks that are like lower impact. Like something where it's like the foundation may be great, like but maybe it's not the best block for this like lineup. Mm-hmm. So I just don't need that +3 high block. I'll just get like a mid or a low or something like that. So
that was my exact mentality for playing against Snake Man in teams round 1. I was like, oh, Showdown's a cool card, but you're useless to me right now. So like they all went out for Leaf Shields. Yeah. Like so I was increasing the attack count of my deck, but that's an Omni block that just stops Snake Man. Yeah. And so and I was already playing the comparative fights. And so I was just like, maybe I take out a few Dust Crushers because that's got a high block on it, but my that one has a low block. Hyper Bombs. Take out the Hyper Bombs because they got the high block on it. I'm like, I don't want the 5 diff. So like those are exactly what you're kind of talking about. The coolest sideboard, I have to mention it, just because I finally thought about it when you were kind of saying it, was the coolest sideboard I've ever seen is Ringman. Obviously, Jacob Johnson is playing him because it's a Jacob Johnson deck. And he's playing the Wrath of the Raging Demon meme. So the point is you want to get rid of all of your opponent's momentum. And so then game 2, he sides them out for Dragon Flares. So your opponent has the mentality of I need to build up as much momentum to stop the Raging Demon. And then you burn them for 6, 8, 10 or whatever with the Dragon Flare. And you're playing Ringman, so it's way easy to play.
That's funny. That's definitely
that was the coolest sideboard I've ever seen. That was just actually like the deck mind game sideboard completely. And it had nothing to do with to like help the deck's consistency. It was just, this is what you're going to do after playing game 1. So this is how I'm going to kill you game 2.
Is there,
in worst case scenario, it's a 0 low block. So
is there a rule in UFS that if you can act like you're siding, right? You can put your sideboard cards in and then take them back out, like you're actually siding cards in and out, but you haven't really done anything.
I did at Nationals. I took out my character card in the sleeve and acted like I was siding characters because they kept reading my character during the sideboard phase. And I was like, whatever. I'm not an asshole, so you can do it. Yeah. And then I pretended to side it out so that all their thinking had to go in the trash can. And I'm like, nah, just kidding. Here we go. And then I did all my regular siding. So.
That's funny.
I don't know what the rules are regarding that.
Yeah,
but
I don't think
it matters. I mean, I'll sometimes ask, and I'll typically like tell my opponent, I'll be like, I sided 3 or I sided 4. Yeah. And that's just because like when I started playing, like the first tournament I went to, people basically just told me, after siding, they're like, I sided this many. And I was like, oh, okay.
I think it's more of a sportsmanship.
I've never played a game of sideboards before, so sure.
Yeah, I think it's more of a professional kind of like courteous thing. I'm going to tell you this obscure number that I changed my deck, but you don't actually care, and what is that information going to do for you?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Well, the thing is too, if you say your opponent sides in all 8, that's a big tell then that they need help against you, or maybe they
just completely changed their deck.
Or they're completely changing their deck, or they're doing the whole Phil Birch strategy where they're taking out their defense for offense, or maybe they start defensively and then go to offense in game 2 or game 3 or whatever like that. I need to get better at siding. I
how about as opposed to like building a sideboard?
Yeah.
Because we've touched on a little bit about like the actual like how like what you sort of do when you're siding. Like I guess like how do you pick what to take out, or like if you're just like I'm putting this in, like what am I taking out to make room for it? Because I know like there are times where I'm sort of like looking through my deck and I'm like I want to fit this card in, and then I'm just going through and I'm like don't want to take that out, don't want to take that out, don't want to take that out, and then I go completely through my deck and I'm like, oh well, let's look again, and then it's like either I find something or I'm just like guess it's not coming into my main board.
Yeah, so. No, I usually tend to try to find. Try to find like numbers, like if not to check the difficulty at least. It's different when you're siding in attacks though, because if you're trying to make your deck more aggressive, you're siding out probably higher cost difficulty foundations than lower, because you at least want to be able to build properly early in the game. So I believe that's what I normally do.
Don't you run like 1,000 spams anyway?
No, not anymore. Since I keep getting yelled at on the Discord channel. So, I've learned my lesson.
I've started to build a lot of decks with less and less spam.
Yeah. Well, relevant spam, I should say.
Yeah,
relevant spam. So
there's a lot of them in Bebop, though.
Oh,
so.
yeah, they're all... Yeah.
It's true.
Like Police Connections is like...
Oh,
whoa,
yeah, that card's great.
That's
nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Admonition and basic training. That card is terrible. This card's amazing.
Power creep, man. Power creep.
Which one's police? I'm blanking. Is that the one that you flip and then they can't
respond? Yeah. You don't get to flip what you think.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah, basically, I'll flip this instead of whatever you wanted to hit with.
Yeah.
It's a better basic training because it's a 1/6 with a +1 mid.
It's a 1/6 with a +1 mid.
It's fantastic.
What was the other? Actually, Harrison's Lucky Day. You want to talk about?
Yes, I think that card's really good too.
Yeah,
that's also one of my favorite. Dude, I saw it. So like a little aside, I saw that episode. Like it came on TV.
I just watched
it
a week ago.
And they're like about like they finally they caught Twinkle and they're like carting her off and like Harrison was like the guy that like fucked up basically. They were like that was why she got caught or something.
He was always like Mom.
And he's like and she's like don't worry. I'll punish you when I get back. And they're like, what? And like that was one of the lines of either like Spike or Jet. It's just like, well, Harrison, I guess it's your lucky day. And they just like carting her off. And I'm just like, dude, that's the best card name in the set.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when you sideboard, you try to not mess with consistency as much. I guess it also depends on matchups, I believe. You got anything, Barrett, about that? Switching in and out cards?
Again, for nationals, sure. Like my go-to thought was if I side out 4 attacks, I need to put in 4 attacks. Mm-hmm. Thus, if I side out 4 hyper bombs, I have to put in 4 leaf shields. Because at the beginning, when I started playing this game and I wanted to get good at it, basically, I wanted to get good fast. I was struggling in the deck building concept of I want to check less attacks, but I want to still see enough of them. And if I was to screw up that number at such like a high nerve setting like nationals for me, the way that it was, I didn't want to screw up the math of my deck in a negative way. So I didn't want to put in my 18 attack deck. I didn't want to make it 20 or make it 22. I didn't want to do that. So instead it was attacks come out for attacks or actions come out for attacks, because in my mentality, actions only have one better check than it. At least the ones I was playing in my deck,
right? Especially if you're bringing out like a 4 check action.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, an attack, especially with like a leaf shield, a card that I'm going to be using for a block, that's something that I can do with that. Or actions come out for assets, because again, they're not cards that I use to pass checks. They're additional stuff.
Yep.
And those were the only kind of cards those were the only cards that I was playing in my sideboard. And actions came out for actions. I would never take out foundations for action cards. So like that was kind of my rule of thumb. I was already playing so few foundations anyway, so like I never sided out foundations. I could never do that. So it was always, and that's why there was no foundations in my sideboard, because I knew I wasn't ever going to replace things.
Sure.
So like I guess that's kind of where I was coming from. You're right for the aggressive deck, maybe putting in lower difficulty attacks, which locally it did do that for me very well. I would take out hyper bombs and I would put in leaf shields, or like at the Rockford PTC, took out my hyper bombs and I was like on a 3, or sorry, it would be on a 4, on a 5, on a 5, on a 6, on a set, like, and I'm playing my whole hand right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, and these are all for abysmal numbers because I'm playing Mega Man and I'm committing nothing because I'm checking all of this because it's a 5 on a 5 on a 3 on a 3, things like that. So it allowed me to become more aggressive in a deck that was not built to be aggressive. So it's definitely something that it can do. But I think the character is kind of what decides that. And like, so if you're playing a character that just can't let you do that, then I just don't know. I don't know how you do it if you're not playing it. Like I'm playing a character that says this attack does a ton of damage.
Yeah.
And not every character in the game says that.
Yeah.
Like actually, Rob, when you were playing your Vega deck that I was really inspired to kind of build, I already had a Vega deck, but it was under air. And one of the hardest problems with the air deck is like I want to play specific attacks and do specific things, and I'm like, no attacks are really good to sideboard in this deck ever, because the character doesn't make every attack amazing.
Right. He just makes them cheap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like that's why the only attack that was in my sideboard was a Zuna drop, because sometimes killing all of your opponent's momentum is pretty good, and it's a throw, and it has flash. So like that was the only card I could ever consider sideboarding, and I always just sided out. I think I was like Raging Clash or something, because that attack doesn't say anything on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I feel like typically, like when I've had I'm sort of the opposite. Like I often kind of like have my attack lineup, and like that's sort of like what I want it to be. And if I have an extra like attack or two, it might be something like a Soul Trap or Dimension Door.
Yeah, Dimension
Door. Something like that. And where it's a little more techy. But even then, like that's the kind of stuff that I would just run in like Gutsman, and it was super easy to just have like a one of attack, because if you checked it, you just drew it.
Yeah.
So that sort of like was a little more dependent on like the character. But for me, honestly, I think I just don't worry that much about the check. If it's a 4, if it's a 5,
yeah.
I'm typically like more concerned about like the effect that I'm getting for it.
Yep.
So I think that's sort of like the first thing is I'll look at is I'll be like, okay, like I want this effect in the deck, and then I'll sort of think like what, based on what I'm playing against, like what card in my deck is like the most dead. For instance, like I'll usually have like if I'm playing like a water life or something, like I'll have at least 3 card red-handed, sometimes 4. It kind of depends. But you'll run up against things that are just like, you have some draw. But, like, for instance, if you're going against, like, base, I mean, maybe he's got, like, Surveyor if it's, like, an Earth build or something. But even then, like, I don't know. I mean, Surveyor, like, it's an okay use of, of a card red-handed. Yeah. But you could also just, like, block stuff, which you want to do anyway.
Like a card, you kind of want, when you sideboard in cards like that, you want especially, like, if you're facing like a high draw deck, I would say that a Surveyor wouldn't be a great use of that, but like a card like against like a Templar or whatever, murders.
Right, but
murders.
What I'm saying is like, for instance,
so if you're going against
there
a
might
life
be a
deck,
card that is sort of like universally like good.
Yeah.
But maybe in this particular matchup, I'm just like this. It's like I don't need this to be this many. So this is a card that's coming out for that.
Yep.
So like I typically will look at like effects first, or for instance, if you're just going against something, you're like, this deck really has almost no speed pump, or maybe the speed pump is like +1 or +1 or +2, and then maybe like Dust in the Wind just isn't that good. Maybe like High School Crush or something takes care of it on its own.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, okay, well I don't need Dust in the Wind, so like I'll get that out of here and get these in. And so I guess like after that, like the first thing will be like effects about like what do I want in, and then what is the least important that's currently in here. And then after that is really blocks. And like we sort of mentioned that, where I want my like sort of my block zones to be either about where they were, or I want to shore up a certain zone.
Yeah.
Like you were saying against like a Snake Man, you're just like, okay, if I have lows, like I'll bring in lows, but like I'm not going to side anything with a low block out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I need them. So if I'm going to side out anything, it's just like I got to find like some high blocks that aren't necessarily like the best.
Mm-hmm.
And all those are just like you can't necessarily like plan for, because that's just sort of dependent on what you're playing this round.
Yep.
So I guess that's like a little bit more on the fly, and just figuring out like what your opponent's doing. I mean, like, I think there are times where I'll just side, and the only thing I'm siding is for blocks.
Yeah.
And like, where I'm just like, I feel like in terms of like effects, attacks, like whatever, it's like, I have a pretty good matchup against this deck I'm playing against, but maybe I'm like light on the mid zone or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have like 3 or 4 cards in my sideboard that have a mid block. So all those are coming in, And, like I know, like I mentioned it with the Metal Man, like the one, like the Slams All version that Giggles played. I saw one of those when I was playing in the UK, and that deck was basically all mid attacks, and then like the gyro slam or crush or whatever it was that was high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just brought in every single mid block in my deck, and I took out maybe like a couple lows and something else, and it was just because I was like, hey, guess what? If I see like one more mid block this game than I wouldn't have seen before, like guess what? That pays huge dividends because
one less attack to have.
Right. That's like basically gives me like -5, -6 damage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So, and like, it doesn't matter what it says because I wanted to block with. So,
do you think, say for like a new player building their first sideboard, do you think they should stick to, like, say they don't have a good grasp of the meta, what would you suggest that they would stick their sideboard to? Would it be maybe they're like you and Scott, Rob, where you guys can't really get out and play against a bunch of different decks other than against yourselves over and over again. Or maybe it's like a single guy, like take like Thomas Gordon, for example. He's pretty much by himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does he build his decks?
No, he does not.
Oh, okay.
Who
builds his sideboards?
You build the sideboards. But just use him as an example where he doesn't really have a play group. But say someone like him, say some random guy in the middle of America wants to come to a nationals event. He doesn't have a lot of people to play against. What would you suggest for him to build a sideboard? How would you explain to him how to build it?
Cards you own?
Well, obviously that. Yes.
I think that's tough. I think that almost goes back to.
Would you just tell him?
I think that's just like a meta call.
Well, yeah, but if he doesn't know the meta,
they don't know the meta.
Say he doesn't know the meta. So would you say, well,
you're screwed. You're dead. You're not gonna win. Why would you waste your money?
For one, but we're trying to be positive here and help out people.
I think that in that case, you just kind of have to look at, what you sort of consider, like that almost just goes to straight up deck building, like what you consider a well-rounded deck.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you just sort of say like, I want some answers to momentum, some answers to speed, some answers to assets, like
if your life is screwed because you have no
an answer,
momentum,
like an answer to throws, just stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically just look at your deck and if there's something like that's lacking, put in some more of that. I mean, basically like speed or damage resets, like those are never going to be like dead cards.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You'll always have like a use for something like that. Something like a Templar or whatever, maybe that's something that like you don't want to run 4 of main board because you're like a 6-hander, but maybe you run like 1 or 2. And then if you have more, you can just put them in your sideboard because if you're running against something that's very aggressive, like you can just bring in more of those. I think for a deck like that, that's the kind of thing I feel like just shore up what it's doing already, and maybe just throw in some sort of like generically powerful cards that maybe you didn't find space for main board. Mm-hmm. Like for instance,
like Bebop Blues.
If you're not running like a survivalist or something, just put in survivalist.
Yeah. Should be main board though.
Yeah, I mean, depends. I don't know.
I think that card's whatever. Right now, at least.
Yeah. I ran that. I didn't run that in Vega on Death because I got talked out of it and ran Reward instead. And guess what?
Reward.
He won that event.
Reward's a really good card. It's just underplayed. But
I think to add to that list that you're talking about, like generic answers, I try and find and put in my deck. I like to try and find, like we were talking about demanding submission a lot. Keyword hate. I think keyword hate's really strong, whether it be multiple reversal.
Yep.
So like cards like demanding submission, Way of a True Warrior. Like I definitely sideboard Way of a True Warrior on any of the symbols that can play it.
Mm-hmm.
Other weird meta calls like
Scorn Beauty. I know that's something for life. If I'm ever just like, man, I need like 2 more cards for my sideboard, which I'll just put in Scorn Beauty. Whatever.
Yeah, that's the 2/4 without a block, right?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. I consider that card as well, but it has the good symbols, so I just put in Way of a True Warrior.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh no, that one's all air and life. It's my two.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like I definitely try to do keyword hate, character hate. So we have bang as a new card now. That's why I play stop. It's for character hate.
Stop is pretty nuts, by the way. Stop is nuts. Not stop. Bang. Bang.
Oh, I mean,
bang is
bang.
nuts.
You talk about like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely run like secret history.
Yeah.
As like, if not main board, I'll just throw one on the side because it's like if I'm going against something.
Yeah.
You know, if you're like, for instance, if you're going against like a stone man or something like that, and you're just like, man, maybe I just need one turn.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can just sort of like throw it in there, and if you see it, like maybe you get your one turn.
I think that's exactly what Bang says, but Bang can also be aggressive, which is really good in a versatile card. And for a 3/4 with a 2 high block, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna sideboard it underwater in Gemini Man right now, just because sometimes it's probably gonna win me a game.
I won a game with it with my spike 1 off of water. I put a guy to 3 and he wasn't gonna block it, and I was just like, bang.
Bang.
I win.
That's the best.
Yeah. We have to do the finger guns though when you do it. Bang, 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 bang. So
see the space.
Yeah. I think we did pretty good discussing the topic, even though it's kind of hard to because it's really all player match to match type stuff. So I think we did pretty good so far. Anything you guys want to add to it? I think we're about an hour in, so we're good. So if you guys want to add anything else,
I think the biggest thing to add is make sure it's 8 or 0 cards.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
That is the biggest thing to add.
Yeah,
Probably
should have started off with that. Actually,
we did start with it, so it's okay. We're recapping.
Recapping.
So 8, 0 or 8 cards.
Yep.
My mentality, again, like I said, is you never want. I think foundations don't really have this place. They obviously want to be high impact, and they should bring something to your deck that it doesn't already have, or it needs and more answers to for specific matchups. But I think one of the biggest ways to make your sideboard the most optimal and something that you're going to enjoy using is you kind of just have to do your own research. Yeah. Whether you want to play at a competitive level or you do locally. If you want to build your sideboard just for locals, sure. That's a really good way to start practicing it, even if you want to go to a competitive event. If you want to be competitive, then you need to do your research. And every PTC that you see something top and you see, wow, this card's coming up a lot, or this character's coming up a lot. Is there something I can sideboard to help me with that matchup? I think it's research, and then you'll kind of find what you like based off of that.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with all of that. I would say don't be afraid to try things.
Yeah, for sure. Just
even if you don't.
That's what the sideboard's for, honestly.
To try out different options. So maybe you'll find one card in your deck works 6 out of 10 times, but you're siding a card in that works 10 out of 10 times. You find out that I'm gonna switch it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of what Barrett said about, especially siding for locals. I mean, why not? I mean, I know I gave Chris's. There was one time where I just went in on Chris's locals because he just kept winning with. I think it was Grant.
It was everywhere.
It was everywhere Grant.
Yeah.
And he just won 3-4 weeks in a row or something 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, and I was just like, guys, look, I'm gonna give you a laundry list of cards that stop this, and
none
you
of
have
them
a sideboard,
and still none of them played
any of it. Dedicate your sideboard to hating on everywhere Grant.
Yeah,
because don't let Chris win again. And it's I have a guy who plays locally, and he does this main board, but he basically always runs 3 copies of Soul Trap. And the only reason he does that is because I play reversal decks. And it makes me lose to him because I'll be like, haha, I got him. Oh, I got Soul Trapped again. And and that's it can, I mean, I'm sure it's satisfying for him. It's something if you're man, I'm so sick of losing, for you, it could be I'm so sick of losing to Jacob in locals. What's he doing? It's you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just dedicate all 8 cards on my sideboard to this. I'll put in a couple main board cards, and if I play him, basically 10 to 12 cards in my deck
for sure
be dedicated to beating him. So that's what, a 5th of your deck.
I built the Mega Man deck under good, and I'm like, you know what? I think it's totally a meta call, and mainly a Jacob Johnson call, but he's playing the Infinite Black Dog's Fangs deck right now. All right, we're going to put 4 Shoryukens in my sideboard, so that says no. I'm like, this card's usually terrible, but we're going to play this card.
I know.
I'll give it Breaker 2, and you can't do that anymore.
That's
so,
hilarious.
and honestly, it's one of those things to where if Black Dog's Fangs or, maybe Tengu Dive becomes really popular again, or, I don't want to deal with cowboy batteries everywhere, it's a 2-of in the sideboard still, even after I've done it to hate on Jacob Johnson with Black Dog's Fang.
Right.
But, that's where you learn that these cards kind of have purpose. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I know for the longest time, leading up to Nationals, JJ could not win a match against me. And as much as when you're trying to get to that competitive level and you're trying to prepare for those events, I will say you obviously don't want to single-handedly dedicate your sideboard to one person that you're not going to probably play against the Nationals. Yeah. But it's definitely good to start experimenting with the answers to specific types of gameplay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
in that vein, my sort of joke is I played in the Atlanta PTC I played last year, but not last year, but I think the year before. And I was playing Gutsman at that point, and I had 1 or 2 copies of Self-Destruct in my side, and I had none main board. And in, I think 3rd, 4th round, I played against Garrett, and he was just playing a deck that was just generic all wall or air wall.
Oh, he had 8 characters in the sideboard.
And the sideboard was, I think it started on Robert, and the sideboard was 6 air characters and 2 random cards. And what he would do between matches is he would hand you a D6, you would roll it, and depending on the outcome of that die roll, he would side into that character because he was just trolling people. And game 1, he just built a billion foundations, and there was absolutely no hope that I was going to be able to win the game. And all I was thinking about the whole time was, man,
I wish I had Self-Destruct.
I wish that I had a Self-Destruct main board. And ever since that event, I've always had at least one, and is a main board card is an out. And when I played him in the UK, it didn't matter for Swiss because I checked it and he immediately removed it from the game with Vincent. But the fact that it was in there, I was sort of sitting there. That's actually what I was doing. I was sitting there and I was just going, hopefully it's I'm playing 1 card a turn and then reviewing 1. So I'd basically draw 2 each turn. Or, we were at the point where we were just review, pass, play 1 card, pass, review, pass. We were doing nothing. But I don't know what he was doing. I think he was just playing the long game. I was sitting there just going, hopefully I draw this Self-Destruct instead of checking it. And I checked it. But I knew it was in there. So that's what I was doing. And then having the other one on the side, and the main reason that those cards are in that deck is because of playing against Garrett. And they obviously help against other very, very defensive decks when they build up a ton of foundations as well. I like Self-Destruct as well. I may have built a deck with 4 main board, but
and JJ talks about it all the time. He's all when you played against him at Rockford, he's all he saw it every turn. He saw it every time he needed it. He saw all 4 of them. It's over. He's playing Athena, so that's how you beat Athena. You just blow them up.
Yeah.
So, but stuff like that. Right when you have it in the sideboard, that's one way to do it for the sideboard too. Is if you're just sitting there in some game and you're like, gosh, you know what card I really wish I had right now? And whether it's in your deck or not, maybe that's something that you're okay, well, it's just the cards. If you ever find yourself in a game going, man, I wish I had an answer for this. That's the kind of card that if it's not, maybe it should be main board, maybe it is, and you just didn't draw it. But I guess those are the moments that you want to be looking for when you're deciding what's going to be in a side, what's going to be that tech, because those are the situations that you hope to avoid with like a sideboard. It's just going like,
Mm-hmm.
even if you didn't draw it, it was there. And like, maybe you just didn't get, maybe you were just unlucky that game and you just never actually saw it. But
then like you'll put the games in.
But then you
like,
have the games
you see them,
right,
and then you're like,
just build it turn one, and you're like, well, I'm set now.
I played. It was the last round of Swiss at Nationals. Played against Satoshi, playing the Cannonade air stuff. I built Living Pendulum Hanya turn one for both 2 games, and I 2-0'd him because I built Living Pendulum. It's like your character does nothing.
Yeah. Usually, if a character like that sees that card, they should just pack it up and go because they have no answers for it. So
yeah, exactly.
And
so he was trying to play some air wall, and I was like, "You play a single attack, I'm going to reversal you, and like that's it." And I was like, "I'm going to Honda you. You got to block it. You're a 7-hander. You have no life." Like it was over. It was a swift 2-0, and that's what gave me my spot at top 16. So I was just like, "All right, that's pretty cool." And then Living Pendulum proceeded to not be used at all during tops. So but because I run that one copy of Living Pendulum for those kind of scenarios, it's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've covered sideboarding in general for the masses tonight. So I guess that's it. I think we've pretty much already said our final thoughts on it.
Yep.
So I just want to thank Barrett for coming on the Guile tournament.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited for like a week now because we playing this last week. I was like, I get to be on the Guile trip. This is great.
Yeah,
I don't even get excited about being on UFS University, but it's like, because they're my friends, I help them out, I guess. But I was like, I get to be on the Guile trip.
Ooh.
So thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
It's been a blast.
Rob, thanks as always, and we'll talk to everyone later.
All right.
Good night, everyone.